On today's episode of Your Cup of Counsel, we are discussing tipping culture, some new laws related to tipping and protecting workers, and we're drinking delicious blue bottle coffee. Come and join us.
Tamara,
Yes, ma'am.
we've had a few listeners drop some DMs to us asking about laws around tipping and whether they have to share tips with coworkers, whether employers can take a portion of their tips. So we thought we would just do our best at a whole episode on tipping and what the laws are, what you need to know, what questions to ask. So let's jump into it.
Yeah, let's. So, this is a topic very near and dear to my heart because I was in the service industry for probably 12 years or so. My very first service job was at Red Robin as a hostess. And from
I'm
there,
sorry, bottomless fries?
yeah. It's the most nostalgic place for me ever because I was like 16, I think, when I got my first job there. And the fries and the sauces and the burgers and all the things
Delicious.
still very nostalgic. But I worked everywhere from like fine dining to catering to dive bars to college pubs to like everything you could imagine. And I received a lot of tips, and that's how I put myself through college. And it's actually one of the reasons I wanted to become an employment lawyer specifically, because the restaurant industry is really rife with like legal violations and mistreatment of workers. And tips are partly kind of not to blame for that, but it directly involved in some of the mistreatment, it's particularly when it comes to underpaying employees. And as most people are aware, restaurant workers are very, very reliant on tips. Usually, they're making minimum wage, and tips are the way that they can have sort of a livable income.
Yeah,
So they're
I look before we started this episode, I looked up a couple stats on tipping.
Mhm.
And in the United States, service industry people that are really relying on tips, I read that 10 to 15% of their entire yearly earnings is based on their tips
Mhm.
alone.
Yeah.
That's a huge percentage.
It's huge. And it means that if you have a bad day as a server, it's a really bad day because it doesn't just mean people weren't that nice to you at work, the customers weren't that nice. It usually also means that you didn't really make much in income that day. So tips, and it's sort of a controversial thing. I've heard the other side of it, which is from people who don't want to tip, who say, why should I as a consumer have to make up for what the employer should be covering? Employers should be on the hook for paying a livable wage. That shouldn't be my job. They shouldn't delegate that responsibility to me. And I understand that, but part of it has to do with a cultural choice that we have made, at least here. And I know it's different in other countries, but we've kind of bought into this system, and it is also really hard to run a restaurant these days. And if restaurants had to pay the amount that servers and hostesses make from tips, then they may not be able to run their business. So there's a lot of sort of reliant aspects on our tipping culture that are all sort of connected to each other, where if you pull one out, then other things will fall away,
Makes sense. Yeah.
But in terms of the law, let's talk about the law on tipping. Basically, there's a few basic rules, right, that exist in a lot of different states, but particularly in California. Managers, so if you're a server at a restaurant, your manager cannot take a portion of your tip. And what that means is like the employer can't take a portion, and managers are considered an agent of your employer. So,
Well, that makes sense, right? Because I assume managers make a lot more money than servers.
well, yeah. When I was a server, we would always kind of joke that the managers really didn't make more money than the servers. They just had more responsibility. So I don't know. Maybe things have changed. It's been a while since I was a server, but that is the idea that if you're a supervisor or a manager, the company is paying you more, so you don't need tips to. At least that's the logic, right?
Okay.
But the way that can come out is some restaurants and other tip. I'm going to use the example of restaurants. There's other workplaces where tips are a thing, but there are some kind of sneaky ways sometimes that employers will use to try to get around that. So what they'll do is they'll do like different tip pooling things where they force everybody to put all of the tips in one bucket and then they divide it. That is actually lawful as long as the participants are clearly defined in the tip pool and there's like a logical way to calculate it. So it's based on the hours that you've worked or some other like metric that's more of a
Okay, wait,
formula.
hold on. I have so many questions.
Mhm.
So when you say the pool has to be clearly defined, you mean the people that work at the restaurant?
Yeah.
So could it be people that aren't even there on that day, or is it like per shift, whoever's there, those tips are pooled? Or is
Yeah.
it how's the pooling work? Because
It
I've
would
never
be.
worked in a restaurant.
Yeah, so it would be whoever works there that day, and some different restaurants have different ways of doing it. So sometimes it'll be a percentage of the total tips. We'll go to a certain class, like the bartenders will get 10%, and the busboys will get 4%, and the servers will get some other. They'll divide it up that way. Sometimes, there's 5 people in a small restaurant that are working, and they're all servers, and we're just going to put all the tips in one place and divide it equally by 5. There's different ways that you can do it. But the point is that it can't be unfair to a certain group of people, and that the basic principle is that the workers are the ones who earn the tips. It's not management. So as long as that's sort of adhered to, then it's usually okay.
Makes sense.
Um,
What about customers? Does any of that get disclosed to the customer? Like if I go to a restaurant, my server is outstanding, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to go above and beyond and leave all this money for my server. Do I know if that's going to my server, or is it going to like
that's
a
a good
collective
question.
pool?
I don't think so. I mean, as someone who goes to a lot of restaurants, I don't think I've ever been told one way or the other. I mean, I guess you could ask your server if you wanted to know.
Right.
But it's an interesting thing. There's definitely different sentiments when it comes to tipping, right? I happen to be an over tipper, but that's only because I worked in the industry for so long, and I feel like it's a bit of a karmic debt that I'm repaying. I just, like I said, it's an issue that's kind of close to my heart because of how reliant I was on tips. And in my view, sometimes even if things go poorly, it's often not the server's actual fault, depending on the issue, of course. But I know that there's differences across other cultures, and you're someone that's pretty well traveled. Have you been to places where tipping is not a thing?
Yes. So tipping is most common in the United States, Canada, France, and the UK. I think are the top 4 places that are really dependent on tipping.
Mm-hmm.
And then places like Europe, it's less expected. Usually only if it's really exceptional service do you leave a tip. And even then, it's usually like 5 to 10%. Whereas we know in the United States, it's at least in San Francisco now, I think customary is like 25%, which is on the higher side. Some people still live 20%. I don't know if anybody is still leaving 18%, which I know was kind of the base level tip for a long time. But tipping, the norms around the percentage really is geographically based. And I think it's constantly changing over time for sure. And then there's some countries where it's actually rude to tip, like Japan, Sweden. I know there's a handful of countries where it's considered rude if you leave a tip.
And why is that? Do you know?
I don't know the cultural significance behind it. I think it's like demeaning. Like they're already paid for the profession that they hold, which is, if it's a service industry, they take pride in that profession. And so if you're, giving them extra money, it's like you're pitying them, leaving them extra. But that's interesting. And so I always tell people too, when you're traveling, especially if you're not well versed in travel, like that's one thing that I always look up before I'm going to a new country is what is the tipping culture? What are the tipping norms? And another really cool thing that I just realized is on the iPhone, if you go to your calendar or your calculator app, there's a tipping function. So you can put in a tip conversion and you can put in the country, and then it'll give you like, you're in this country and they tip 12%, and then you can do the tip calculator.
Wow.
Super handy.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other sort of red flag that I tell people to look at, or that I get questions about, is if there are employers who are trying to pay you less pay you under minimum wage, for example, because they know that you're being tipped. And so they're hoping that the tip will be like the delta so that you'll end up making minimum wage, or you'll end up making a certain amount, like basically using the tip to offset the employer's legal obligations to pay. That's a no-no.
Yeah.
They have to pay you a certain wage, and that they can't use tips from consumers to get kind of over that.
To get there.
Yeah.
Okay. Has that always been the case?
As far as I've been doing this,
Okay.
That's been the case. Yeah. I think in different states it might be different, but California is, again, it's the most worker-friendly state in the country. So it's my understanding that has been the case for a while. The other more recent development is around credit cards. So, and I know you and I were talking about this, the credit card processing fees whether they can be taken out of tips or not. And the answer is they cannot anymore.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Because I think the consumer also, like, that's a concept that would be lost on them. So the old law was that if you paid at the end of a meal, you paid with a credit card, and you wanted to leave your server $15, your server is actually not getting that $15. They're getting the credit card processing fee out of it. So they're getting a lower amount. And now, since January of this year, at least in California, the server is going to get whatever you wrote on the tip line, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again, the reason for these new laws and the reason that it's great for me practicing law in California and representing employees is because California really cares a lot about consumers and workers, and sort of there's a recognition of how hard people are working in these fields, and especially, as we saw during COVID, how hard it was to be a restaurant worker because you were out of work for so long, and it took people a while to really decide that they wanted to go back to restaurants, and for those folks to have their jobs back again because so many restaurants had to shut down, and all of that. So I'm really happy to see that these laws have changed again to be more beneficial to consumers, or sorry, to workers. And hopefully it'll be more of a trend in that direction.
Let's talk about what you leave tips on,
Mhm.
because I feel like this has been kind of up for debate lately. Like, you check out, you buy a bottle of water, the iPad swings around and it's asking, do you want to leave a tip? Yes, it is Starbucks. Yes, when I have them make me coffee, I leave a tip. But if I just ran in to grab a bottle of water, do I leave a tip?
Mhm.
Like, how do you know as a consumer what's appropriate? Like, I'm tipping for a service. For me, it's like a service versus a product. Like, if I
Mhm.
go to Macy's and I buy something, there's no opportunity to leave a tip because I'm buying a product.
Mhm.
So that's how I feel when I go into Starbucks and I buy a water bottle and nobody made me coffee. Am I wrong? Should I be tipping on my water bottle? What do you think?
I wish I was a master of etiquette, of social etiquette. I am not. Um, I am probably the worst person to ask because I fold like a cheap suit and I tip everybody all the time. And I'm the most sympathetic and biggest over tipper. And actually, my mom and I get into arguments about this because she tips lower than me. And whenever she takes me out to dinner, there's always, I always offer to leave a little bit of cash on the table, and she gets very upset about that. And it's a whole thing. So reasonable minds can differ, but I think that's a good rule of thumb. If you're paying for a product and the person didn't actually do anything for you, or, sometimes I go and purchase something and I'm buying a product at Starbucks, for example, and the person that's dealing with me is really cranky and not very nice to me. And it feels strange to give that person a tip a little bit, right? So there's always judgment calls that can be made.
Totally.
But I do always think that, we're all kind of in this challenging world that we all live in as members of our community. And I remember when I was a server, getting a good tip on something really was enough to just make my whole day better. So I try and think about that when I'm dealing with members of the public, but
Yeah,
I don't think there's one rule of thumb or the other.
that makes sense.
Hmm.
So I consulted the internet to
Oh,
look
good.
for a chart on when to tip and when not to tip and some recommended tips. And I would love for our listeners to drop comments in because
Yeah.
or drop a link to a source. Like,
Yeah.
I would like to know that I'm doing it right.
Pin this down.
I don't want to shortchange anyone. So here's a couple things that I thought would be interesting to our listeners. Bellhops, right? You go
Oh,
to a
yeah.
hotel, you check in, you've got a bag. First of all, usually I only have one bag and I know they want to help and that's their livelihood. And I'm like, I can handle my one bag. And then it gets
Mhm.
awkward. I don't
Mhm.
know. Do I give them my bag? Do I not? Okay, so we've gotten past that awkward phase. I've decided to give them my bag. How much do I tip on that?
I don't know.
I
And
have one
and you
bag.
have to have cash.
You have to have
because if you don't
cash.
have cash,
So now especially when I'm going international, I check what's the tip rate and then I make sure that I have the right currency and I have enough
wow.
cash. So when I get where I'm going, I'm not rude as like my
Yeah.
first interaction with the staff wherever I'm staying. Okay,
Mhm.
so bellhops. Again, I went to Reddit. I found a chart that was out in the last couple of months. I don't know if this is accurate or not. So listeners, please drop comments if this is way off base. So bellhops, it's suggested $1 to $5 per bag. I mean, that's not enough though. If somebody goes up the elevator with me, I only have one bag and we get to the room, I'm not going to give them $1.
Yeah. Also, my bags are at least 190 pounds. So
That's true. Okay.
So I think I count for 3 bags, even
So
if it's all of them.
I usually do a 10. Like, I have one bag,
Yeah.
I give them a 10. Is
Mhm.
that seems normal to me.
I
but-
give you 9.6 out of 10 for
Okay,
that.
let me know if that's wrong.
Okay.
Okay. A hotel doorman. He opens the door. I usually don't give him a tip. Am I supposed to give him a tip?
I mean, maybe if you're injured and it's hard for you to walk through the door.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. So now I'm having a lot of guilt because I've never tipped a doorman. That hasn't done anything else for me. Hotel staff maid. I tip every time.
Me too. I love tipping the hotel staff.
Same,
Man. I'm a huge fan. I
same.
write
This
them a
makes
little
me so
note.
happy.
I
Yeah.
write because usually they tell you their name. So
Yeah.
I'm like, dear Jacqueline, thank you very much for keeping my home so clean.
Mhm.
Whatever. I love it. I'm a
Yeah.
big fan.
Same. So what do you
Mhm.
leave for a hotel tip?
Depends on how many days I'm there, and depends how messy I was.
Yeah. There you go. So it's based on the cleaning rate. So
It's a sliding scale.
again, this Reddit chart that has no credibility whatsoever. It says hotel $1 to $3 a day. I also think that's light. I would
That's
never
crazy.
do that. Yeah. Again, I do a 10.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
think
also, yeah, it totally depends on where I'm staying, and
absolutely.
yeah, and what, how long and all of that.
Taxis. I do 20%. I do
Yeah,
the same as a restaurant.
yeah.
I mean, if anything, it's like more important. They've just taken my personal safety into their hands. They've transported me somewhere.
It's true.
If they drove safe and I got from A to B, I feel
Yeah.
really good about that.
Let's hope they have UAM insurance.
Right.
Watch our episode on insurance if you
they
haven't
can't.
already.
You can.
Yeah, there you
Tamara,
go.
UIM is what you get to protect yourself. We learned this last episode.
Nothing.
Okay. All right. Tour guides.
How many tour guides do you use?
Oh, I like a tour
Okay,
guide.
well, that's good for you.
You don't ever go on like walking tours where you're in a
I have
city for the first
before.
time?
Yeah. How much does Reddit tell you to tip your
So
tour guide?
Reddit, again, this unofficial guide says 10% of the cost of the tour.
That's okay.
So
That's
that might be, I think it really depends, right? Like if it's a pretty cheap walking tour, if it's a $16 walking tour ticket, I'm not going to give them 10% of that. That seems cheap. I'm probably going to give them still $10.
So yeah, I don't know. I think tour guides. I agree with that. I agree with Reddit.
10%? Okay.
Almost never, but right now I will.
Waiter, it says depends on geography, 15 to 20%. I will tell you, somebody will spit in your food in San Francisco if you only, I guess you're leaving 15% at the end of the meal, so there's no opportunity to spit. But that would mean that you had poor service.
Yeah.
If you only left 15%.
That's a cultural thing though too. I mean, San Francisco, again, we care a lot about workers here.
Yeah.
I wonder how that's different across the states.
Okay, now what about this one? Because I have had conversations with people, and some people are really offended. I don't know that offended is the right word, but restroom attendants. Like if you are, I see this at like nightclubs. If you're at a nightclub and you go in, I don't need cologne. I'm not using really any of the products. I'm just in there to use the restroom. In my mind, I feel like the attendants are there just to kind of keep an eye, make sure nothing nefarious is happening in the bathroom. That's in the States. Like if you're in third world countries, a lot of times there's bathroom attendants offering toiletries and towels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I tip in that situation,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't really tip in the US for restroom attendants. Is that?
I don't know. I
Tacky?
mean, I've been in a bathroom in a nightclub, and I've been given like the loveliest little mint and the loveliest little warm towel, and I'm like, take my money.
Okay. In that situation, yes.
Yeah.
I'm just talking, you walk in, they're sitting in the corner, and I'm not getting anything from their tray.
Different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a different thing.
Okay. So what else? Like listeners, please drop comments. Again, I would love an actual authoritative checklist cheat sheet that says what I should be leaving in different scenarios. Because I'm sure this Reddit guide that I found is not necessarily accurate.
Yeah.
But I would love to be doing this right.
Mm-hmm. That's the PSA for today. Make sure that you are tipping appropriately, and now you're aware of new laws relating to tipping and protections for workers. Anything else that you think we should cover on this topic?
No, except I just got a comment that I found that says Canadians are the worst tippers. So, Tamara, as a Canadian, you just were bragging about.
I'm really ashamed of my entire country.
You were bragging about how you are an over tipper. Does that stem from some guilt?
Maybe that's
cultural guilt.
Maybe that's why I fight with my mom about it.
Maybe that's why your mom's a bad tipper.
And maybe she still lives in Canada. I love you, Mom. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
Well, what are we drinking? What's our coffee today? I think we're drinking Blue Bottle.
Yes,
which is from down the street. This is one of our favorites.
Go to.
This is a San Francisco staple, and there's a couple actually in our little neighborhood here. And yeah, we're very lucky to have this delicious coffee. And I think I actually did tip my Blue Bottle
I'm sure
person
that
who
you
gave
did,
it
because
to
you
me
are an over tipper, which I appreciate.
Cheers.